World Development System. Chapter 11. He made necessary preparations for the time if that wild snake ambushed them if they were too focused on fighting the fox. It was Josephine who started out to attack the fox while Eva would hurl fireballs at the fox. However, it won't work much as it was Firefox, so this time they thought it would take a fight of attrition to tire the fox out and then kill it. The fight started with Josephine bashing the fox with her shield and trying to hack it with her great sword from the sides. Josephine succeeded in bashing the fox but was not able to hack it with her sword because that fox was too fast and avoided the mortal strike. After making some distance from the group, the fox first attacked with a fireball to Josephine. Josephine defended herself with her shield and again rushed in to attack it. Eva's fireball didn't do any damage to it. John, looking out for the snake, first took out his bow and aimed at the fox. He then filled the arrow with wind magic and shot it at fox. The arrow moved in a very fast manner and hit the fox in its leg. It pierced the fox in the leg and it became quite easy for others to take it down. John didn't take any other action apart from that one move. Now he was only looking for the snake and when the snake would ambush them. As Josephine was about to land a killing blow on the fox, the snake finally made its move on her. This time John had already fired his arrow with fire magic and then later a knife stuck on the snake throat before killing it. Coincidentally, it was later found out that the snake he killed before was actually the purple snake which he needed. Ambushed by the snake, Josephine and others were shocked. However, what shocked them, even more, was the reaction of John. His actions were very fast and precise. After this combat, Eva and her team had a renewed opinion of John and his archery skills. The things that shocked them the most was his ability to use multiple magic on the arrows and infuse it. Although magic was only a supportive element, it had quite an effect when it came to overall battle. Josephine successfully killed the firefox and then they started collecting the necessary materials required from their bodies. John only collected blood and poison from the purple snake. He then later helped them in harvesting the skin and blood of the fox to the team. Firefox's skin sold for quite a lot in the cities. While they were traveling, they slew quite a lot of beasts and collected all the required materials. John wasn't quite interested in these items, however he did try to take herbs which he found useful on the journey. It was evening and they found a place for camping. This time John sensed that a pack of animals were stalking them from quite a distance. It seemed that they chased them via the smell of blood and their own unique smells. During this time a group of snow wolves were tailing them. John made everyone aware of their current situation and told them to prepare for a big fight this time. During the whole journey Sally hadn't made a move, but this time she moved and started preparing her wand and few talismans. Talismans were usually prepared by magicians before the battle so as to use for big magic, so they don't have chant them or get distracted while focusing their mana. As the group of wolves neared them, both Eva and John started attacking them before they could come near them. Both used fire magic. She used the fireballs and fire lances while John infused fire magic inside his arrows and shot them. They already shot 10 of the wolves down while they still needed to kill 10 more. This time Sally moved and used her big magic after preparing for enough time and shot multiple ice arrows on them. Although it was ice element, they were still vulnerable to physical damage. They got pierced by the ice arrows and hence became immobile. Meanwhile, the Snow Wolf King was still in the back watching from the sidelines. As the wolves approached them, only 3 were left and Josephine took on 2 while John moved forward with his knife and fused it with his fire magic and then engaged the remaining wolf. He first dodged its attack, then directly pierced the knife inside Snow Wolf's eye as the most efficient means of engaging the wolf. Then he later pierced the wolf in its head and killed it. Meanwhile, Josephine and Eva were engaging the 2 wolves. Sally was looking out for John if he would be in some problem. Watching the moves of John, Sally was very surprising in the sense that he moved and acted like an experienced hunter and killed it cleanly. Then later he moved to help both of them and they cleaned the remaining snow wolves without a lot of effort. This time Snow Wolf King didn't attack and instead retreated inside the forest. After making a camp they made their food. They decided later to take turns in keeping watch over the camp. While they were sleeping, John still had his senses on his surroundings. it may be because of his six senses body refining technique and super-fast calculative brain that it became an instinct for him that he could sense malicious entities that were nearby in his range. The night had gone without a hitch after the fight with snow wolves previously. Every one of them took turns to switch who will guard during the night for any incidents. The next morning they again set out to hunt the monsters that they needed. Today Eva, Josephine, and Sally took John's combat seriously and decided their positions appropriately. Both Josephine and John were the vanguard whenever they get into combat with wild and magical beasts. Josephine was quite happy with the situation subconsciously and was in a very jolly mood. This day they hunted tiger magic beast which was quite deep in the forest. It was quite a hassle to kill it as this tiger magic basic could use the light magic itself every time it got injured. It was John who dealt the main finishing blow by piercing both the head and heart via multiple fire arrows. Chapter 12. This day they hunted tiger magic beast which was quite deep in the forest. It was quite a hassle to kill it as this tiger magic basic could use the light magic itself every time it got injured. It was John who dealt the main finishing blow by piercing both the head and heart via multiple fire arrows. As they traveled the forest they moved east and so they got near the East Sea City. They first hunted the animals they needed but John still didn't get the three-legged black crow. What was unusual this time was that there were quite a lot of beasts in the forest this time around. This was noted by Josephine, Eva, and Sally. John didn't know about the flow of animals in the forest. He thought it might be the normal number of animals. There were quite a lot of dangerous beasts this time around when they entered the forest. Eva and her team even thought that it was good that John was with them this time or there might be quite a few injuries this time around. Because of the long journey of 5 days, they decided that should just rest in East Sea City while they were near it. East Sea City. They neared the city and got into the city after paying and showing their ID proofs. John got his ID proof of North Frontier Town by Sam. After entering the city. I am so tired, my body is aching. I seriously need a bath and a place to rest. Eva said, stretching after they entered the city. Well, let's first check into the inn and later we can check the markets for any new things they might have this time around, Sally said in an easygoing tone. So they headed towards the inn to first rest and bath, then later check out the market and sell their catch and just keep the important stuff that they need for the village. After checking they first rested and did their own things. John then came inside his room, took a bath and then decided to check the system. John checked his notifications bar where saw that he got a medium-sized gift box and a place where he saw that authority level had risen and brain activity increased. He then opened his gift box to look for the rewards. Ding! Congratulations on getting the blueprints of steam engine. Then he decided to buy 16 small gift boxes worth 16,000 EXP points from the system. He opened the first gift box. Sorry, this gift box didn't contain anything. Try your luck next time around, came the voice of Sarah inside his head. For the next 10 gift boxes, he got the same answer, which irritated him a lot. He thought he should have rather exchanged the EXP points for W.D.S points previously. After everyone was ready they then headed to the market. After heading to the market they first decided to sell their catch. John didn't take the money as had taken the other body parts of the animals he needed. While they were in the market Eva slightly furrowed her brows as she saw a person at some distance away from them. This person was none other than the second son of Baron Mendes. His name was Antonio Mendes. He was a normal aristocratic silkpant who lived in the imperial capital from his childhood, where he studied most of his night knowledge and mingled in aristocratic circles from a young age to increase his political and business connections. Like any other aristocrat, he had his fair share of women who he dumped them later on because of interests and their status. Although polygamy was normal in this world, but aristocrats still minded that the people they married should either be a noble or at least their family owned a big business. It was all about interests when it came to aristocratic circles. Antonio was interested in Eva because of two things: one was her beauty and other was her family connections and her grandma, who could even make potions which could increase the longevity of people. Eva knew about her situation since a young age and hence always hated the aristocratic circles. She only stayed in imperial capital to complete her magic training and then live with her grandma in the countryside. She didn't like her main family as well, as they always tried to use her as a chip to improve their family interests, and hence she escaped from capital as soon as possible. Antonio approached the group and greeted Eva first. My Miss Eva is as beautiful as ever. You are here again in East Sea City in a matter of 10 days. I guess you are having good hunts nowadays. So what brings you here today? It is none your business of what I do and where I do. HMPFH. Eva didn't give him any face because of his inquiry and fake smile. She knew what his intentions were anyways. To this Antonio didn't mind anything, as he knew what her social standing was anyways, and then later he greeted the other team members, to which Josephine only nodded with a fake smile while Sally ignored him. At last, then he later came to John. He was quite surprised that there was a man in this team, as he knew the temper of these women. Plus he also saw that this man had quite a good relationship with Eva and her team from the way they conversed. To this, he was quite infuriated in a sense. What did Eva saw in him and not him? However, he didn't show his thoughts outside and thought about how to make this man understand his position. Plus he also noted that this guy didn't even have a high-quality sword, so his position might not be too good anyway. He was at least not a noble or high knight from the imperial city. So to retain a bit of superiority in front of these women, he thought maybe he should embarrass this fragile good-looking man in a duel where he can shame him fairly without anyone questioning him and make him show his position. Friend, from your attire you look like a swordsman. How about we have a duel in the city to exchange pointers? How do you feel? Antonio asked John in a friendly manner so he doesn't find his malicious intentions. From the start, John watched everything from the sidelines and thought he should go along this play and accepted the duel. From the start, he watched the ruthlessness in the eyes of Antonio, so in this fight he decided that he won't show him mercy. The women didn't show any expression, but Eva and Josephine were still worried that he might get injured, as he had only shown his knife skills and not sword skills when they were hunting previously. As for Sally, she was convinced that John won't lose after watching him fight for a few days. She knew how terrifying John's senses were. Unlike the other women, they thought his senses came from his instinct of fighting, but Sally knew better as she saw him over the days. They then headed to the duel grounds. Chapter 13. From the start, John watched everything from the sidelines and thought he should go along this play, and so he accepted the duel. From the start, he watched the ruthlessness in the eyes of Antonio, so in this fight he decided that he won't show him mercy. The women didn't show any expression, but Eva and Josephine were still worried that he might get injured, as he had only displayed his knife skills and not sword skills when they were hunting previously. As for Sally, she was convinced that John won't lose after watching him fight for a few days. She knew how terrifying John's senses were. Unlike the other women, they thought his senses came from his instinct of fighting, but Sally knew better as she saw him over the days. They later headed to the duel grounds. John wasn't nervous for the duel. On the other hand, it was Eva and Josephine who were nervous because they knew that Antonio was one of the powerful knights from the imperial city. Although John was strong, they didn't watch him fighting with a sword, nor did they know his sword skills, so they were quite worried about the duel. From Eva's point of view, as she knew Antonio quite well and understood how the nobles dealt with things, she was sure that he would try to at least cripple him, as he thought of him as nothing more than a mere commoner. Worried that John might take it just as a common duel, she approached him and told him in a worried tone, "John, be careful of Antonio while you are dueling him, because from what I know he is a well-renowned knight in the imperial city. And it just so happens even the third Prince Hector has taken note of him. In 2 to 5 years he might even become High Knight and become a part of his army as a commanding officer, leading at least a company of 200 soldiers at least. You should at least try to protect yourself well and not underestimate him." This time John was quite surprised and happy by Eva's worried tone, but told her in a carefree manner, "Well, I don't think there would be any problems in the duel. Just to make sure I don't get injured, I will be extra careful and save my light magic to heal myself for an emergency." Watching this unfold, both Sally and Josephine were surprised by Eva, while from Josephine's eyes John could see that she too was nervous, but she couldn't express herself. John approached duel grounds in a carefree manner so that the team doesn't get nervous. Antonio, his butler, and his batch of bodyguards watched this unfold while they were preparing for the duel. Watching this, Antonio was sure now that he must dispose of John or else he will snatch Josephine in front of his eyes. Duel arena was 50m by 50m, enough for a duel between people whether they were knights or magicians. People on the sidelines watching the duel arena recognized that Antonio was going to duel someone. "Hey, who is the new unlucky guy dueling Antonio this time around?" someone from the crowd said. "I heard it was Antonio who proposed the duel this time around from his guards, and it seems that it was because that guy was in the team of Miss Eva," other guy said. "No wonder Antonio challenged him to a duel. That guy might not know that Antonio had placed his sights on Miss Eva from a long time ago. I guess it's his misfortune this time around for meeting Antonio in the wrong place," said the guy who just came here. People looked at John with pity. While all this commotion was going on, Joseph was in East Sea Town to supply his second batch of soaps to his family merchant ship. While John was out in the forest, Joseph had again bought and ordered a new batch of soaps from his rose soap factory. Watching the commotion, he too was interested in what was going on and heard that Antonio was going to duel someone, so he thought maybe he should watch what was going on. Watching John on the stage, he was quite surprised why someone like John would be challenged by Antonio. However, hearing from people why the duel was going on, he understood what happened. He only hoped that John would at least get unscathed, as he knew that John at least had the strength of a normal knight, but he was still worried as he didn't if John had the necessary skills to fight Antonio. In the dueling arena was the man supervising the duel. He was a middle-aged man who worked for quite a few years already over here. This arena was anyways maintained by Mendes family. As both of them entered the arena, the supervisor vaguely didn't answer all the rules as Antonio asked him. He was making sure that if things go differently he would use a magic scroll just to be on the safe side. John also noticed the rules were vague but didn't mention about it because he felt it anyways suited him better with his magic. Chapter 14. The supervisor vaguely didn't answer all the rules as Antonio asked him. He was making sure that if things go differently he would use a magic scroll just to be on the safe side. John also noticed the rules were vague but didn't mention about it because he felt it anyways suited him better with his magic. It was only stated that it would be a knight's duel with their swords. Many people in the crowd understood what was going on between Antonio and the supervisor. As soon as the duel started, John didn't move instantly but waited for his opponent to move so that he could gauge and understand his movements better, just so he be careful and attack appropriately later on. Seeing that John wasn't moving, he thought that his opponent might have got cold feet or he might be approaching this duel very cautiously. Having no choice, he first charged towards John with his shield and sword with medium strength just to see how he reacts to his movements. To which John dodged his attack to right with minimal movements and attacked Antonio from his sides with his sword, to which Antonio instinctively reacted and held up his shield to protect his rib cage. After this attack, Antonio instantly understood that his opponent had very high reflexes. From his attack, he gauged that even with the armor he would have broken almost all of his bones from the rib cage and he would have struggled to win the duel later on. After the first attack, Antonio decisively made the distance between him and John. Many in the crowd were astonished by this, especially those who had discerning eyes, and the same was true for Joseph as well, who was watching from the sidelines. This time John made his move as soon as Antonio moved back. John intended to finish this duel as soon as possible. He was a guy who didn't like hassling around a lot. As soon as he moved closer to Antonio, he saw a ruthless glint in Antonio's eyes. He was skeptical, but he still charged forward. Antonio then started using his full strength and met him head for the first sword clash between. As soon as the swords clashed, there came a thundering voice of sparks between them, and it was Antonio who moved back a few steps after this single combat of strength. After this contest of strength, Antonio well understood that John was quite a strong fighter and even stronger than himself, so if he had to win against him, then it would be in terms of technique, speed, or the magic scroll. Speed-wise, John was faster than himself. John didn't give him space for time and to adjust himself. John started using his improved version of flower swordsmanship. As Antonio got cornered, in this last moment he couldn't bear this humiliation of being in a passive position at this stage, and hence he used his magic scroll of Earth Lance and used full force to attack John. This attack was full of murderous intentions. Seeing that something was off after watching Antonio's actions, John moved toward the left and barely escaped from the Earth Lance. Then came the barrage of attacks from Antonio. Seeing that his attack of Earth Lance failed, he was quite enraged. This time John showed no hesitation when he attacked him across his chest. His attack was filled with fire energy, and as soon as it contacted Antonio's armor it still couldn't help him, and his internal organs got injured. After the attack, Antonio landed outside the arena and fell unconscious. This attack wasn't enough to kill Antonio, but it was still enough to cripple him for the next 2 months at least. All the people below the arena were stunned by this development and started thinking, who was this guy who had such good skills? Watching this, his guards and servants hurriedly went to Antonio and watched that he was only unconscious and had injuries on his chest. Even the butler of Antonio looked angrily at John and said to him after approaching him, "Boy, you have certainly offended young master after ruthlessly injuring him. There was no need for such a ruthless attack. There will be consequences of these injuries." The name of the butler was James. His family always served the Mendes family from a long time of his grandfather's era, and hence the position. He was an old man in his 50s with grey hair and a normal build. John completely ignored him and said, "Weapons don't have eyes when it hits people, old man. The same thing could have happened to me if I wasn't careful of that sneaky Earth Lance at the end. Be glad that you are the son of a baron, that you are still alive," thought John in his mind for Antonio. This was the first time John saw the ruthlessness of the aristocrats firsthand after coming to this world. He was very sure that if he wasn't careful he would have at least been crippled. After the duel, Eva and Josephine made a sigh of relief as if a stone was lifted from their hearts. Watching the debacle, Joseph Morgan approached the duo and asked John, "John, I didn't expect you to be here dueling with young Master Antonio. Your skills in the arena surprised me quite a lot. Your swordsmanship was quite unique, with some similarities to flower swordsmanship technique." Chapter 15. Watching the debacle, Joseph Morgan approached the duo and asked John, "John, I didn't expect you to be here dueling with young Master Antonio. Your skills in the arena surprised me quite a lot. Your swordsmanship was quite unique, with some similarities to flower swordsmanship technique." Butler didn't expect that John would have Joseph of the Morgan family as his acquaintance. Before John could even reply, Butler first asked Joseph, "I didn't think Mr. Joseph knew this guy." "Well, we had some business earlier, so we got to know each other. It was Jack who introduced me to him." Joseph deliberately mentioned Jack as he understood the situation John was in right now after the duel. However, he was very sure that Antonio and his men wouldn't lay their hands on John directly now that they knew that he was one of his acquaintances. Butler then turned to Eva and said to her in a displeased tone, "We will now take our leave now that the duel is over." He then turned to the guards and then left with the unconscious Antonio from the arena. After the duel, Eva and Josephine then met Joseph, who was John's acquaintance. After making their greetings, they got to know about each other. Joseph had just come here after taking back the second shipment of soaps from John's factory to the port and making another order of 10,000 soaps to Gordon. While he was in the market, he saw that there was commotion, so he came here to look at it and saw that it was John having a duel with young Master Antonio. Joseph actually warned John and her team that they should quickly escape the North Frontier town, as it would be problematic in 6 months when the winter comes, because this time the situation was quite different from earlier years. This year the wild animals were more than 10 times than it was earlier. From the information I received, it seems that Baron Mendes has decided to completely abandon the North Frontier town and wait for the situation to settle after winter. Although the situation right now is not so serious, but after winter, when food becomes scarce, then it would be a different scenario," Joseph said to them. Hearing this, they were shocked at the development. They only thought the activity of the animals had only increased recently, but didn't think that it was such a situation. After thinking for a while, John asked Joseph, "Joseph, will it be possible to buy the North Frontier town from Baron Mendes if I pay the necessary price to him? You see, I feel at home over here at North Frontier town, and I hope that I can at least do something for the town." Joseph then replied to him after some thought, well, it's quite easy if you want to buy the North Frontier town from the Baron, but after that debacle with Antonio, I think it would difficult to buy it from him at small money though. But I can still help you in negotiations as a mediator from my family connections. You see, North Frontier town's yield at most is 1,000 gold worth at most in a normal working year for the Baron. Plus later there are maintenance costs of roads which amount to 400 gold if done. That is the only cost that the Baron mostly pays. Usually he would mostly always try to sell his domain to most merchants at 6,000 to 10,000 gold coins, but merchants aren't really interested because we don't see value in this land. I think it can be negotiable between 8,000 to 12,000 gold if we try it. What do you think? John directly agreed to Joseph and then later asked him for raw materials of steam engine, guns, and guns powers. He agreed to bring in these materials next time came to North Frontier town for his next batch of soaps for a price of 8,000 gold. After saying their goodbyes. It seems, John, you know a lot of skills apart from archery and knife skills, or your knowledge capability, Sally asked John after a long time in smiling way yet teasing as well. Eva and Josephine were quite skeptical but thought it might be his natural talent that makes him better at learning things. I just know a little bit of everything, John said to Sally with a poker face as he didn't want to get caught in something which he can't explain. Sally didn't bother him much as she knew everyone has their own secrets and asked the team to go towards the market as they still haven't finished the shopping. While Eva and Josephine were in a hurry as they wanted to prepare for the village before winter came. They were quite worried about the village after getting Joseph's information. As John also needed a three-legged crow's blood, he soon got in the search of the blood while he joined them to the market. After searching for a while he got into a shop. It was a big shop with 2 stories which almost had everything. Chapter 16. I just know a little bit of everything, John said to Sally with a poker face as he didn't want to get caught in something which he can't explain. Sally didn't bother him much as she knew everyone has their own secrets and asked the team to go towards the market as they still haven't finished the shopping. While Eva and Josephine were in a hurry as they wanted to prepare for the village before winter came. They were quite worried about the village after getting Joseph's information. As John also needed three-legged crow's blood, he soon got in the search of the blood while he joined them to the market. After searching for a while he saw a shop from afar and got into a shop. It was a big shop with 2 stories which almost had everything. After a while, John found out that it was the biggest shop in East Sea City. It dealt with various things from buying parts of wild and magical beasts to selling potions, herbs, and medicine. They also dealt with various materials which were required at home. In the shop was an old man with a big goatee. This man seemed quite aged, and from the looks of it, he was at least 60 years old. After getting into the shop he first looked around for the various things sold in the shop. He saw that there was a place where there were various animal ingredients. After finding out that there was no three-legged crow blood on the shelves, he decided to ask the old man if there was some in case he missed somewhere else. Old man was watching John for a long time and he also noticed that John seemed to be looking for some blood of an animal which he couldn't find, plus John seemed like a well-balanced fighter to him, so he thought maybe he needs something rare. John approached the old man and asked him, "Hello, I am John. I just recently came to the town and saw that this was the biggest shop, so I hope that you can help me find a three-legged crow's blood. If there's isn't any, do you know where I can get some in this town?" "Three-legged crow's blood?" Said the old man, thinking. "I have some blood of it, but I don't if it will be enough for you. Plus it's quite costly because three-legged crows are very rare and hard to find in these parts as they are mostly found in northwestern forests. Anyways, there is still 2 bottles of three-legged crow's blood inside the basement, plus it is years old. So I don't know if it will suffice with your requirements. However, it will cost you 10 gold coins for purchasing 1 bottle of that blood," the old man said after thinking for a while. John first decided to check the blood to ensure that it was workable and then buy it if was good enough. "Sure, I don't have any problems regarding the price. Can you bring the blood bottles?" John replied. The old man then brought out both the bottles of crow blood and handed it to John so that he can check it. After checking the blood and making sure that it was usable, he decided to buy it and left the shop to join the team and meet up with Eva and others. Meanwhile, at Antonio's residence in East Sea City, he was laying down in the bed with a doctor on his side and his butler preparing the necessary medicine and food and holding various necessary documents. After eating his food and medicine, Antonio first asked the doctor about his injuries in an irritated tone. "How are my injuries and how much time would it take to recover from them?" "Young master, the injuries are deep but aren't serious for any long-term damage to the body. It will take 2 months of bed rest and if taken some precious medicine are used then it will be healed in a month at most," the doctor said cautiously to Antonio. After nodding to Dr. Antonio then turned to his butler James and asked, "So what have you found about that guy from Eva's team?" After taking the document and giving it to Antonio, James then summarized the whole situation to him. "Young master, from the information I collected he is someone who recently came to a North Frontier town. As far as connections are concerned he knows Jack Snake from the Snake family and Joseph Morgan from the Morgan family. According to some people working under Joseph, it seems that he is doing business with John in new soaps from John's factory. He also explicitly said that Morgan family is going to protect them as they value this business relationship with John. And it seems that John also has a good relationship with Jack. So I think it will be hard to make a move on him directly but we can still move him indirectly. But there is one problem." Antonio asked the butler after frowning his eyebrows. "What's the problem?" Butler then said with some fear and relayed the information that Guy is a disciple of that old hag Melanie and it seems that she will protect him if push comes to shove. "What other methods can be used to move him?" asked Antonio in a frustrated tone. "We can move against his soap factory or we can at least bribe someone from the factory to acquire his soap making methods," told James. James then told in heavy expression to Antonio, "But this time we don't need to worry so much. As you know about the situation of the beasts roaming in the north, this time is quite dangerous. Your father Lord Mendes anyways isn't ready to pour resources to protect North Frontier Town this time, so we can move against him at that time as well by sending some assassins. Okay, we will move when the winter comes but we would have to be prepared this time so that there aren't any problems. Also when we do the assassination it is better if we spend more on better assassins," Antonio said to the butler. "Lord, I have a suggestion. Why don't we try to use some help from the third prince for better assassins than regular ones? Plus we have plenty of time before we prepare against him in winter," suggested the butler to Antonio. After thinking for a while he agreed to his idea and started thinking about his preparations. After a while, John then met Eva and the team in the market. This time they were in the market looking for new clothes and other necessary things. The most surprising thing was that shirts with buttons already started coming. It seemed that Jack already started popularizing the new comfortable clothes for both men and women. However, the buttons were made up of iron and hard black stone rather than plastic. "John, it seems that those unique clothes of yours have become popular in the northern market," Eva said to Jack teasingly, "and it seems that even the men's underpants have become famous over here. It may be because Jack watched his underpants when he gave him new clothes to change the last time." John meanwhile thought he made quite a profit this time just by the designs this time. "Maybe I should sell him more designs and do a business partnership. Just watching from the stalls selling clothes here it is very likely that he was a big network when it comes to the northern market." Chapter 17. John meanwhile thought he made quite a profit this time just by the designs this time. "Maybe I should sell him more designs and do a business partnership. Just watching from the stalls selling clothes here it is very likely that he was a big network when it comes to the northern market. Well, I had recently made a deal with Jack for some gold coins, so maybe he used the same designs of my clothes to use them on other clothes and judge the market reaction." John replied to women who were curious about these new clothes. As women anyways liked clothes, they decided to buy these new types of clothes and looked at the market for various clothes. This way John spent the whole day and later returned. After returning to the inn he first decided to make the medicinal pastes and the medicines and then apply them. He then later started practicing the bone refining method and blood refining method. As these were middle-grade body refining methods, he used them with the medicinal pastes and medicines to have the best effect according to the system. After he started practicing, the sounds of beep came inside his head. Analyzing bone refining method 1%. 2%. Analyzing blood refining method 1%. 2%. After 2 minutes they were analyzed, then suddenly new sounds came from his head as he was still practicing the technique. Assimilating bone refining method with ingredients 1%. 2%. Assimilating blood refining method 1%. 2%. After some time. Host, there has been a 100% assimilation rate with the ingredients and new techniques. Host can now continue to practice the techniques without ingredients from now on. It seemed that it took a whole night when he was practicing the techniques. He didn't seem to realize that it was already morning. He only realized it after hearing the knocking from the door where the maid came with food. After taking the food inside the room, he first decided to have a bath and then later meet up with Eva and others. Today they decided that they would return to North Frontier Town and make necessary preparations for the upcoming winter and wild beasts. While returning, he thought about the problem of the population of North Frontier Town. He thought that since he was going to develop the North Frontier, then he needed a population for labor and resource accumulation. If he could successfully buy out the town from the greedy baron, even if he needed to pay a premium for the town, then he wouldn't hesitate to buy it. While they were returning, he first asked Eva, "Eva, do you know of a way to recruit a large number of people in the factory in the town?" After thinking for a while, she then replied to him, "Well, there is a way, but why do you need a large number of people for the factory? Aren't there enough people as it is?" She said to him questioningly. "Well, I actually plan to build other factories in the town, so I hope to get more people, but I think people in the town wouldn't be enough, so I hope to ask you," said John. "There is a way, but you would have to go to the Imperial City or go to big cities of dukes, because that is where you can buy slaves in large quantities. For your factory operation also, that is also the place where slaves of all types are sold," Eva said. John thought that slaves were common in this world after watching the reactions of both Josephine and Sally. Thinking this, John didn't show surprise on his face. Surprisingly, this time it was Sally giving advice to him. "Well, can't you ask your friend Joseph to help you if you are in need of people? You see, there are a lot of debt slaves in capital if you need them, plus I think that friend of yours can help you get a better deal. However, war slaves are expensive if you try to buy them, plus nobles try to keep an eye on small merchants who buy war slaves in large numbers. Mostly it is the nobles or big merchants who usually buy the war slaves. So if you intend to buy war slaves, then you need to keep an eye on the number of war slaves you intend to buy and quality of them. However, since it is for your factories, then I recommend you buy dwarves, since they would be more productive, however they won't be cheap." Hearing this, John was surprised that there were other species in this world. He also thought that Sally wasn't as simple as she seemed to be, as she seemed to know a lot about how to deal with slaves and how nobles kept an eye on merchants when it came to war slaves. John firmly kept this advice in his mind. Mustering her courage, Josephine asked John, "John, can you teach me that sword technique which you used against Antonio last time in the arena?" She was quite interested and curious about the swordsmanship John had displayed in the arena. After thinking, John replied to Josephine, "Sure, I can teach you my flower sword technique, but you need to share your sword techniques with me." John thought that increasing techniques in his arsenal would anyway be good for him when making a new technique or improvising certain techniques suited for his style. Sally and Eva were quite surprised at first, but then thought that this muscle brain just wanted to learn the new techniques and hence asked him. This way they returned to North Frontier Town after a day's worth of travel. This time they didn't travel via the forest, but they traveled via the city towards the west, and hence there were no problems in return travel this time. After returning to the city, they first reported the matter about Beast's number and Baron's plan to Chief and Grandma Melanie. However, there was good news that John's fertilizer theory had worked this time on crops and showed the results, which made the villagers quite relieved this time around. Even Grandma Melanie was quite surprised by crops changing so fast. She had thought that it might have small changes and it would at least have taken a month. This gave her a new idea on how she could also influence the growth of herbs and precious ingredients via studying the soil and nutrients in the herb. Chapter 18. After returning to the city, they first reported the matter about Beast's number and Baron's plan to Chief and Grandma Melanie. However, there was good news that John's fertilizer theory had worked this time on crops and showed the results, which made the villagers quite relieved this time around. Even Grandma Melanie was quite surprised by crops changing so fast. She had thought that it might have small changes and it would at least have taken a month. This gave her a new idea on how she could also influence the growth of herbs and precious ingredients via studying the soil and nutrients in the herb. The first thing John did after reporting to Melanie was to go and check out his factory and its working operations. After arriving at the factory, Gordon first reported him on how Joseph and Jack arrived and ordered a new batch of goods after he was gone for a whole week. It was also learned that they paid a total of 30,000 gold coins. Gordon also reported that Jack was going to wait for him a few more days at the North Frontier town. During the time he was gone, he had earned a total of 30,000 gold coins and 40,000 W.D.S points from his trades at various places. This time he also earned 50,000 EXP points. So in total, he had almost 35,000 gold coins, 60,000 EXP points, and 42,000 W.D.S points. After taking the remaining money and giving Gordon required money for operating functions, he first decided to visit both the blacksmiths and take all the parts to reassemble them at the factory. The machines were going to run on coal, however their production capacity had also increased. This time though, the blacksmith George was quite curious about John because he had heard that John had made quite a sum from soap making in his factories, but he still didn't express it openly. After telling Arnold and his men to take back the machines to the factory, he first decided to meet Jack first, as he wondered what was it that made him wait for him and for what reason. Anyways, I will find it out after I meet him, John thought, and headed towards the market. After some time he met Jack at the market. Jack was quite happy seeing John again and both of them went straight to business. I heard you were waiting for me for a few days. What happened that you left your business and waited for me? John asked Jack after both of them settled in an inn. Well, the thing is, your soaps were more popular than I expected among various nobles, especially the bathing soaps, which were more popular among noble women, and it seems that many of the nobles are looking to snap the business, but you won't have to worry about them taking your business legally. But the thing is that they may try to bribe your factory workers and they would try to spy your factory from other ways. You also have to worry if they try to harm you and intimidate you in giving up the soap-making methods, Jack said to John in a very serious manner. Jack then repeated the same thing as Joseph on how he should leave this town and how it was dangerous over here after 6 months, to which John said to him that he was going to buy this town and defend it. Jack didn't disagree, John, as he understood how people always had feelings towards the land and people who helped them. John thought that Jack was worried about nothing, but he still appreciated Jack for his consideration and making time for him. Jack asked John, if you are anyways going to stay in the town, why don't you buy my poisons? It would be very helpful in resisting the beast waves, and this time my family has given me an extra quota as well, so what do you think? This time Jack had came prepared if John had decided to stay at the town. It was well within his assumptions that John would most probably stay in the town. Okay. Those poisons would anyway be helpful. From this John also got to know Jack's family stance towards him, and it seemed that it was positive from the way they provided extra quota for their poison. Hence John bought all the 5,000 bottles of poison with 500 gold. He never thought that this poison would be so expensive if it was going to be afforded only by the villagers. No wonder it was hard for the village to buy the poison. Later he decided to go to the house of village chief. John, I was always waiting for your arrival so I can give you the good news on the situation on the farms after we tried out your methods. The plants and crops had a lot of effect from your methods and the situation has stabilized in the village for now. Sam said to John in an enthusiastic way, as he knew that John and Eva's team had already arrived. Well, I actually wanted your help this time in recruiting people for new factories. As you have heard from Eva and others, this time winter will be very harsh, so I wanted to be prepared as much as possible for the upcoming disaster and apply my plans earlier. This time I am also prepared to buy North Frontier Town from the Baron so I can support the town as much as possible, John said to Sam after hearing the village's situation. After thinking for a while, Sam replied to John in a very serious manner, well, I can still help you get 20 more people, but you can't expect me to get more people in the future or else the agricultural labor would decline. You see, we have a very limited population, so if you want more people then you would have to recruit people from other towns. But I think it would be very hard recruiting people from other towns since you know our geographic problems. Your best bet would be to buy slaves and have them work for you. John had long ago accepted that he would need to buy slaves if he wanted to continue increasing his operations. He was actually very glad right now that he could still get 20 more people. They then later had lunch together with the same and they discussed the problem solving of farms and how to combat the problems they would face in winter. John also reassured Sam that he bought 5,000 bottles of Jack's homemade poison so that they could resist the beast invasion this time. Hearing this, Sam was very surprised because other times the village could only buy 50 bottles of poison from Jack, plus it was more expensive usually. Plus 50 bottles were always the quota for the village. And most of the rich men like George would usually already leave for the main town of the Baron. It would usually cost them 20 gold coins for 50 bottles. From this, John understood that Jack's family had already prepared to support Jack and John by all means possible for their business relationship. That poison was mostly sold with such a high price because they were always in demand and its raw materials were rare and hard to acquire, and hence price gap. Chapter 19. After their goodbyes, John set out to meet Jay and take some rest at home. So how was your journey in the forest this time around? Jay asked John after meeting him at home. Well, this time I had quite a hunt, plus I didn't have many problems since I traveled with Eva and her team. But there was some hassle with Baron's son when I was in East Sea City. It was somehow related to Eva and later he challenged me to a duel because of it. John said to Jay in a sighing tone. Hearing this, Jay was quite surprised as he understood how those guys from noble families usually behaved. But the most surprising thing for him was John's combat prowess. However, he was glad that John was safe and there weren't any problems. John later made dinner for both of them as he didn't like the bland food here. As he had a lot of money, he had bought a lot of spices from East Sea City for his cuisine needs. Jay didn't decline as he had already gotten hooked to John's cuisine. He even thought if he could he would keep John in his house just for his cooking skills. Next day he visited Paul to see how was the work on his mansion going on. And it seemed that paying extra for labor was worth it as they had almost neared completion for building the mansion. John later gave him another order of making 2 factories for guns and paper on the site of Rose Soap Factory. It was made according to modern architecture. Paul was quite happy these days for getting multiple orders from his rich man. 3 days passed normally. These days his normal routine was to visit Grandma Melanie and later he would train by himself. However, these days it was Josephine who dropped by so that she could learn the swordsmanship technique from John. He had also improved her own swordsmanship techniques with the help of Sarah. After 3 days his mansion was complete and he had decided to visit it today. Today Josephine was accompanying him as he had decided to visit his mansion after they had completed the training. During these days Josephine was quite active when it came to John. It seemed that she was quite stirred after watching Eva and John during their journey. After visiting the mansion, he first paid a visit to Sam so that he could have people to take care of his mansion. Paul and his men had already started building the 2 factories. As it was not a big job like the mansion, it was guessed that it will be finished quite early. After arranging all the things regarding maids and servants, he had decided to throw a banquet for building his new mansion. Josephine was quite shocked after watching the mansion for the first time. Though she had seen a lot of mansions, she had never seen such a mansion in her lifetime with such furniture and architecture. She decided to ask John, who made your mansion this time around? She was sure that John hired some architect from Imperial City or someone who came from a foreign country. Well, it was Paul from our town who made it. I designed the mansion and furnitures. He made sure to make it according to my adjustments. John replied to her in a teasingly haughty tone. Josephine was surprised at first, but it seemed that she gotten used to it. She then told him skeptically with serious eyes, "Tell me honestly, do you know any profession which you don't know? You even improved my sword techniques." This time John didn't meet her eyes and said to her with a poker face while changing the topic at the same time, "Well, I have thing of learning things faster, so it isn't that I know everything, and I was just lucky when I improved your techniques. BTW, why don't we go inside the mansion and take a look around and greet the servants?" Josephine still looked at him skeptically, but at the mention of mansion she decided to have a look for now. Next day the servants in the mansion were preparing for the banquet later on. John had decided to go his factory because Joseph was going to come with his materials today. After reaching at the factory, Joseph was already waiting there for him in the factory. Soon they got busy with important talk. "Well, the materials which you had asked were transported by the carriages. But I got message from my father that the family had contacted the Baron about the acquisition of North Frontier Town, and it seemed that the Baron was not happy with you, but Dad said that it was mostly likely him acting to get more money from you, so you would have to be prepared to cough up quite a lot if you want to acquire the town." Joseph said to John. "Well, I expected something along the lines after my confrontation with Antonio. Maybe the Baron was quite happy with his son getting pummeled, so that he extort more money and conditions from me," John said to him after thinking for a while. "Well, it will take some time anyways, so are you coming with me this time in South since you wanted labor for your factory?" Joseph said to John. "I guess I will join you this time since I would need people urgently anyway." John agreed to his proposition. "BTW, I would need a continuous supply of metals, can you provide it on a long-term basis?" John then asked him. "Well, that won't be a problem. We deal in a lot of things, so don't worry about it." Joseph then prepared to load the soaps and got into preparations of sending it to East Sea City via his men. Joseph had decided to attend the banquet 2 days later and head to South with him later on. John got busy into making preparations for the gun and paper making factory. This time as well he had decided to take the help of Ron and George from the town, so it would save him time. And just like that the rest of day passed. This time he was packing his stuff from Jay Holmes and said goodbyes to him as he was going to move into his own mansion. "I will certainly miss your cooking while you are not here," Jay said to him, sighing. "Well, you can always come by the mansion if you miss my food so much," laughing John said to him. After moving to the mansion he first headed to Grandma Melanie's pharmacy as he had promised her earlier. These days John already learnt middle grade pharmacy from all the books he had read. These days Eva and her team hadn't gone out to the forest after hearing the news and were busy preparing for winter so that there were least casualties. Today John met Eva when was reading the books. It seemed that she had gotten know about John training Josephine when he was training as well, which irritated her quite a bit. So today she decided to ask his help in combat as well as magic. "It's a good thing that he knows magic as well, maybe he can help me improve my combat style," thought Eva as she approached John. Chapter 20. These days Eva and her team didn't go out to the forest after hearing the news and were busy preparing for winter so that there were least casualties. Today John met Eva when he was reading the books. It seemed that she had gotten to know about John training Josephine when he was training as well, which irritated her quite a bit. So today she decided to ask his help in combat as well as magic. "It's a good thing that he knows magic as well, maybe he can help me improve my combat style," thought Eva as she approached John. "John the first heard that you were helping Josephine in close combat and sword techniques nowadays. And you have even improved her sword techniques. So I thought maybe you can improve my close combat and magic as well. Do you think you can help me in my combat techniques as well?" Eva asked John. "Okay, that won't be a problem. You can come at the same time Josephine comes in the afternoon, as that would save time. Meanwhile, we can start today or day after tomorrow only because, as you might know, I am having a banquet for my new mansion and success for the rose soap factory tomorrow." John agreed to this proposition without thinking. But Eva still furrowed her brows but thought against expressing it and agreed to the arrangements made. From today onwards John was allowed to read high-grade pharmacy books from Grandma Melanie. No one was surprised by this development as everyone thought it was only natural when it came to John. Even Eva thought it was natural after watching numerous of John's miracles, whether it came to combat or his learning capability. Meanwhile, Grandma Melanie was busy experimenting with John's theory on farming and implementing on her backyard herb garden. From this, she got quite a few results when it came to the quality of herbs or medicinal flowers. Hence, in happiness, she had also allowed John to access her personal books as well as high-grade medicinal books. She was happy but also in a dilemma that John would learn everything she had to teach in a very short time about pharmacy and magic medicine later on. She anyways thought that if he learned everything, then maybe he can help her in high-grade medicine later on, where it took her a lot of time, which would be helpful in the long run. After his time at the pharmacy today, he decided to invite people in the village for the banquet in his mansion, which included all the important figures. 2 days before, he had already given all the important recipes of food which he liked to the maids in the mansion, and they had already begun doing preparations for it. He was still looking for a butler, but there wasn't anyone suitable, so he thought he could pick one from the debt slaves when he traveled with Joseph towards the south. Today he also got a report from Gordon and Arnold that someone was looking for them and tried to bribe them for learning the workings of the operations of the factory from them. It seemed they were knights of Antonio who brazenly tried to do it. John had expected such a sort of outcome from the day he had started his factory. It seems it was good that I increased the wages of all men in the factory after my first deal, which has increased the loyalty of men, or the situation could have been different, John thought after Gordon's report. He also told him to keep an eye on people who seemed suspicious around their factory. The first thing he did after this incident was to tell everyone in the factory that they must look out for suspicious characters around the factory, which gave a sense of trust to the men working in the factory. Before leaving, he invited everyone in the banquet the next day and gave Gordon and Arnold money for the necessary operations of the factory. He also made sure to make them learn modern accounting methods so that money couldn't be embezzled. Though he wasn't worried about the money, but he still wanted to implement the modern accounting methods, as it would help him later on when his businesses become too big. After inviting everyone, he headed to his mansion for his training later on, but today both Josephine and Eva were in the mansion, while it seemed that both of them didn't say anything to each other. Though both of them still had a great relationship, as they had known each other for a long time. Both of them still had sparks in their eyes when it came to today's training. It seemed as if both of them instinctively regarded each other as enemies. Servants in the mansion were tending to both of them in the garden. As they knew that Josephine came to train every day, while Eva was Grandma Melanie's great-granddaughter, while John was her student. They all tacitly thought that there was something going on between both of them and there would be a show today, but contrary to their expectations, nothing happened. It seemed that even Eva joined Josephine for her own combat training purposes, so there weren't any problems. John then arrived and the day's training also started. John made simulations based on his spar with both of them and gave them advice based on his conjectures on how to best utilize their techniques. Today he also taught Eva to combine two magics. Eva was fire and wind magician, but when it came to wind magic, it had a very large difference when compared to fire magic. Plus, using two magics simultaneously wasn't an easy feat. So she rarely used wind magic so that she could save her mana in battles. Only today John got to know that she was a fire and wind magician. He also taught her fire bullet magic and wind bullet magic, which he had created on his own after learning magic. He made this magic because this magic was very efficient and it had a low consumption of mana. Eva also realized how it was convenient using this magic. Fire bullet magic could also be strengthened by wind magic, which was a plus for her. She had never seen people in the Imperial Magic Academy trying and creating new magic, and if there were, then it was the old coots who were inside their labs all day, and they would certainly not teach their new magic to anyone but only show them to everyone just to raise their prestige. John taught her this new magic as if it was nothing to him. Now she felt quite grateful that she had asked him to improve her combat and magic. As for Josephine, he only focused on her close combat, as her new sword technique can only be improved with practice, as he had already taught her all the important points about her own sword technique and flower sword technique as well. As they were training, 3 hours passed and their training ended for the day. Both Josephine and Eva left the mansion. Today both of them were quiet, but there weren't any ill feelings. Meanwhile, John was teaching the servants on the new recipes from Earth and Sarah's world and doing the finishing touches for the banquet.